Welcome to the Embodied Living podcast. I am very excited this morning to speak with Tara Whitney. I'm going to let her introduce herself and tell you all about her amazing work. Welcome, Tara.
Thank you, Mira. It's great to be here.
Yeah, it's really nice to have you. So, as we discussed, I'm super excited just to listen to how you want to share. So, tell us a little bit about yourself, your work, how you got into it, what brings you most alive in it.
Sure. Yeah, I'm really passionate around working with female leaders who are just, quite frankly, wasting precious time and energy focused on weight loss and bringing them to a place where they can really create more trust in their bodies and more confidence in themselves. And the reason I'm doing that work is because I was one of those female leaders who really thought that I was doing all the right things and felt that I wasn't quite fully successful because of the size of my body and because I felt like I had so little control over food. And it was a real maddening cycle for me because I kept doing the same thing harder, hoping for different results. I laugh at myself now because when I just say the words. And so to put that into technical terms, I am a certified intuitive eating counselor, which means that I use intuitive eating, which is a principled, evidence-based approach, a non-diet approach that helps people really tune into their bodies around food and let the signals of their bodies guide them on how to nourish themselves. And I'm also a yoga teacher. I owned my own yoga studio for almost 5 years here in New Hampshire in the United States. And I taught yoga teachers. And so I now feel like, even though I had this corporate lifestyle for many, many years, I now have this like great synergy between my yoga practice and my own personal transformation and my own lived experience of really feeling disconnected from my body, really judging my body and not being happy with my body, to a place now where I know what it's like to feel peaceful around food, to feel respectful and relaxed in my body, and to no longer have those patterns, those painful patterns that used to overtake me, so that I can coach people to really do the same. And then I'll also say that one of the things I also love to work with folks around is around emotional eating and just being able to recognize their needs, recognize what they're feeling, and no longer need to, if they don't choose to, use food as a way of soothing and distracting themselves from what's happening inside of their bodies.
Amazing work. I'm really curious, Tara, because one of the most powerful things, right, of those in our kind of coaching arena and zone is often about our own journey. And what we do is fascinating and interesting, but what is often most inspiring for people is who we are, who we're showing up to be through our own experience. And I'm curious, what got you there? What was the light bulb moment, so to speak, that got you from being in that pattern of, if my body's this size, I'm not okay, and keeping on trying, going harder in all the things you'd tried before, to actually shifting? What brought that about?
It was a lot of surrender. I think that there, as I reflect back on it now, there was definitely this higher self that had this voice inside of me that I could hear, like I was noticing, and it kept saying, there's an easier way to do this. Like it was just this really clear, it doesn't have to be this hard. Your body has the answers. There's, and I didn't know quite what the voice was or if I could trust it, but because it spoke enough, it kept leading me to a place of healing. I think that's one thing that was like of my own experience. But then I think the experience of me doing this like full time as a coach and as an author and as a podcaster and like content chair, I think there was also this moment because, you know, I could have just healed my relationship with food and then continued to work in corporate accounting. I could have done that and just like maybe taught yoga on the side. It's like a side hustle. But then I realized that my process wasn't something that I got from somewhere. Like it was something that I picked pieces of all these other places that felt very unique. And everywhere I looked and read, I was like, no one's, I mean, I know this is the case, I think, for all coaches, but like no one was coming at it the way I came at it. And I needed that in order, like if one book did the trick, then maybe I would have left it there. But it wasn't that. It wasn't just one thing for me. I had to pick out all these other pieces. And so I would say both of those things were really pivotal around what kind of makes this work so alive for me, because there was a part of me that didn't like this idea of doing what I'm doing, because it's, you know, it's really vulnerable work. It's not something that people feel happy talking about and sharing. It's, I think, a space where in the world, especially among female leaders, where we've been sort of given the directive, whether we like it or not, that we need to show the world we have our shit together. This is an area where it's like, ooh, here's this like dark secret where I don't have it all put together. And, you know, for me to feel truly myself and real as a coach, I've had to share some things and continue to share some things and continue to offer up my approach that isn't that neatly, nicely put together. You know, it's messy and it's, you know, filled with side steps and, you know, a whole bunch of things that just makes this whole journey what it is. And so, yeah, those are the pieces.
It makes me think about, I mean, I'm so touched by that, and how, given that you are talking about something that for anybody, any individual, it's vulnerable to talk about challenges with food or body image. And then if we look at women in particular, and then women in positions of influence and leadership, and how visible they are and how much they get judged traditionally in our culture for whatever they're doing around appearances, and that you're taking that sense of, I don't know, the word that comes to mind for me is vulnerable leadership, you know, of really leading the way for your clients and for people interested in this work, in the sense of, it's really important that we acknowledge that we don't have it all together. And this is an obvious way that we don't, that maybe, I'm wondering as well, even adds another level of difficulty to actually facing it, working with it, loving it, healing it.
Oh, completely. Because I can't stay on the surface, and I have to often really sit with what I want to share, what I want to talk about. And I'm like, is this just, you know, I'll sit and be like, oh, I'm going to share this. Does this feel true to me? Like, or is this something that I think people just want to hear? And I, you know, that's coming easier and easier over time. But the true to me is like, oh, boy, so now I go to Instagram on this, or I go to LinkedIn on this, or, you know, wherever those places are. But yeah, I love what you're sharing, Mira, the whole idea of vulnerable leadership. And by the way, this is a work in process conversation. I mean, you know, I'm challenging and holding myself to that place. And, you know, by its very nature, I recognize that, you know, this is a place that's necessary, and it is inherently challenging in and of itself.
I just think it's such an important approach, Tara. I haven't heard someone express it in the way that you did. And I think just given the sensitivity of this topic for people, all topics and challenges that we have are sensitive, but in my perception, this is a particularly sensitive one. And therefore, for you to have that strength and courage and willingness to go, yeah, look, it's messy, and I'm still working things out as I go along. And in doing that, I'm going to encourage all of you to do that. You know, you haven't had the first session and, oh, I'm fixed and I'm cured, or, you know, it's like,
Yeah.
this is a work in progress for all of you. So you talked about your own method and the components of it. So I'm curious to understand more about what you felt was really specific in what you needed in the program that you put together for yourself, and how you got started in really transitioning into the place where you are now.
Yeah, I really quickly drew some connections between why I was dieting from such a young age to what some of these core beliefs I developed about myself were. So I started to link together, oh, wow, you know, I'm doing these patterns and they have a root behind it. And a lot of the origin went very deep. And I think there was just this part of me that wanted to excavate that. Like, I wanted to not just understand it so I could ruminate on it, but I wanted to bring it up so I could look at it and heal it. And there weren't too many places that I looked that were able to kind of draw these connections together like I felt like I needed to, so I could in some ways dismantle the patterns at its core, because the pattern wasn't the problem. The pattern was just the coping mechanism and the strategy to distract me from what was at its core. So I think, to summarize, like, I wasn't interested in fixing the symptom.
Yeah.
I wanted to use, and I can say this easily now in hindsight, like, I used, and I do this with my clients, my relationship with food was just a catalyst for deeper healing. My relationship with my body was just a catalyst for deeper healing. And people can use anything for deeper healing. You know, people can say, oh, you know, my relationship with alcohol brought me to deeper healing. But that's really the way I approached it. I didn't know what was happening at the time. But now what I bring my clients back to time and time again is, as I say, you know, we're going to walk through this door, and this door is going to be your relationship with food. And then you get to really take these tools and take this healing and take these strategies and practices, and you get to, like, basically, if you choose to, transform almost every part of your life, because what you're getting is a deeper sense of trust in your body. And from that foundation, everything changes.
That's so funny. I think last time you and I were chatting, you were talking about the overlaps between our work, and I'm really resonating with it right now. I'm hearing it, like, that message of really connecting, you know, the fact that you use the word intuitive as well touches me, because I think a lot of these different doorways into different ways of embodying or being embodied or having a better relationship with our body is really about learning what we used to know how to do, learning how to be more tapped in to our own intuition. So how do you teach that with your clients?
Well, it's in some ways it's unlearning, because, you know, diet culture teaches and constantly barrages people with the idea that diets work. They just haven't found the right one. And, you know, all of my clients have been on a diet. That's who I work with. I help them to unlearn how to diet. And so, you know, diets inherently turn people away from the wisdom of their bodies and ask them to follow external guidelines without discernment, without any input. Actually, they say, if you're going to do this diet correctly, we ask that you ignore hunger. That you ignore quote unquote cravings. You ignore desires around certain food. And so for people who started dieting at a really young age and then got really good at dieting, what they learned to do was tune out the internal and tune into the external. And so when I start working with a client, it's often naming all of that and letting them know that, you know, they did everything right and they did it really masterfully. And then we'll talk about why that didn't work. And, you know, I don't even need to tell them why it didn't work. They'll tell me why it didn't work. You know, just even the conversation I had earlier today when clients said to me, because I kept longing for food and I never felt satisfied. Like there was such emptiness inside of me. And it's like, you know, what a brilliant way to describe a sensation that she was experiencing in her body, but yet she was trying to follow a rule that told her to ignore that sensation. And so, you know, we unlearn all of this so that we can reaffirm and reignite, just like you said, like all of that intuition that's already here, it's already living inside, and then calling it out really explicitly. So when there is those body sensations that come up and there's an honoring and a listening, like I'll call it out and I'll be like, wow, isn't that amazing? Like you already knew this, or your body was already sharing all of this information and you knew to listen. And, you know, what happens is the biggest thing is that people stop spending so much time thinking about food after we've worked together, after they've started to come into a more intuitive relationship with food. So food doesn't become a big deal anymore. And then all of a sudden they have this like mind space and energy to start to focus on other more important things in their life. And this is what I really love about the work I do, because people, you know, clients will come to me feeling, and they'll share, I think about food all day, every day. And then, you know, we'll finish our work together after a period of time, and they'll share how they can be more present in their relationships, or they have time and energy to focus on anything, their gardening, their business, you know, their work, or just feeling peaceful in their life. And it's just such a gift that they get to like reclaim all of that back.
That's so interesting because, you know, I look at things through the filter of childhood trauma and post-traumatic stress. And there's such a fundamental, if our relationship with food, even in that field, it's a really, like I look at people when I'm doing work, if something's off, so to speak, with food, like they're struggling to nourish themselves properly or their addictive patterns, then there's such a clear indicator, like you said earlier, of something deeper going on, and something deeper, you know, our relationship with food, so reflective of our relationship with ourselves, right? This idea of, you know, one of the patterns that I see a lot, and I'm curious if this is part of what you explore with clients as well, is like shifting to looking at food as that deep source of love and nourishment towards oneself, instead of, I don't know, a reward or a tool for punishment. Or I'm curious like how it gets perceived in some of the patterns that you see with clients.
Oh, sure. Yeah. And it's so complex because, you know, even culturally, we hear food is love, but don't have too much of it, or only eat this amount, or just eat certain kinds of foods and then it'll be okay. Or, you know, for people who are in larger bodies, it's like, oh, well, food can't be love for you because clearly you've had too much. And so you might, you know, the message that gets sent for people in larger bodies is, you know, you're not deserving of food as love because clearly you've abused, you know, you can't be trusted in that way. And that's even harsh for me to say. Like, I get kind of cringy even putting words out there, but that's really the messages that get sent. So all of, like, you're right, that there's so much confusion that we get. And, you know, maybe it's not culture that sends those messages, but it's a parent or a caregiver or a teacher or a coach. And so recognizing that depending on people's sizes of their bodies, that they could have been growing up with a level of discrimination and stigma and phobia around the size of their bodies. And that has really been impactful around their relationship with food. You know, I talk to people who will say, I just don't feel safe eating what I want because of the size of my body, meaning they feel judged. They feel judged when they're checking out at the grocery store, or they're in a restaurant with friends or family. And so a lot of this is very real, and we're getting a lot of information on the outside. But to heal that, I think you're right. Like, fundamentally, let's all begin with the truth, which is that every single body is worthy of love and respect. And one of the fundamental things that a body needs to survive and thrive is proper nourishment. And that nourishment doesn't need to be the basic necessities of, you know, chicken, rice, and broccoli. It includes things like the food and nourishment for pleasure, which can include a whole range of different kinds of foods, not just foods that we would call nutritionally dense. They can also be foods for pleasure, and recognizing that that's nourishment too. And that if people choose to, that is absolutely a way to love and respect their bodies.
That is so interesting, Tara. So I've never heard it put like that before. So what I'm getting a sense of, and let me know if I'm on the right track, or, you know, how you would express this, but maybe I'll ask it as a question. So what is the starting point that you guide people to develop? Like this idea that, okay, you know, you've shared it now. So everybody is deserving of respect and love, and food, if we take it at that really deep level, that we're loving ourselves through how we use and relate to food, and nourishment in such a broader context. I'm fascinated by this, if this is like a kind of pillar in your approach.
Yeah, I think, you know, it's I so appreciate the question. And so I'll just sort of let bubble up what's kind of coming up for me. So on one hand, I think food needs to be like so healing for people, meaning if ever anybody felt deprived or had food scarcity, whether it was a willing food scarcity or like it was imposed on them, like food can be such a source of healing. And then on the other hand, food can be incredibly neutral. It can be like, it's so, and I don't mean to take us in a completely different direction, Mira, but like in some ways, I just want to call out that there are so many ways we can invest in our health, and food is just one small way. So like one of the healing opportunities that my clients can have and I've seen this time and time again, is when their relationship with food ends up being nourishing, there's this opportunity to feel somewhat neutral around food, to kind of come to this place where it's like, I get to enjoy it when I choose. I can be in community and enjoy it if I choose. But all of it is being filtered through the body and the body's preferences and the awareness and the tuning into the body. And then recognizing like, but wait, when it comes to health, there are so many other ways to really feel nourished. Things like, what's my environment like? Is it a nourishing environment? What are my relationships like? Do I have good communication? Do I have trust in my relationships? What's my work like? Is my work nourishing? Do I have creative outlets? Am I moving my body in a pleasurable way, not out of necessity or obligation, but just because my body loves to move in a certain way? Like all of these things, am I honored and revered among my community, or am I being marginalized, which would obviously be a detractor of health because it would just really harm people in certain ways. And so it's like, we can move from, yes, so big, and then move to this place of like, I'm liberated. I'm so liberated, where food just isn't a big deal in my life anymore. Isn't that amazing?
I love that. Thank you for expressing that so clearly. And yeah, really, it impacts me because I think, it's a paradigm shift, right? So you're talking about diet culture, and then the focus is on food, and the focus is on rules around food, and then how we express our relationship to ourselves through those rules, and you've done well or you haven't done well, and tick or cross, and then to just say, oh, well, as you said, we look at the pattern with food as the doorway in. Okay, here's a focus point. It's just that some patterns or wounding or deeper need for healing is most visible in this area. And then that transition to when it becomes neutral, like that indication of the deeper healing. This is just one aspect of my being, one aspect of my life. It's really beautiful. I'm going to just direct us into, Tara, I think anyone should work with you now that I've learned, even more about you. Because I really get it. I think most people have something of this in them, right? We're so denatured is the word I use for it in so many ways. And what is this neutral, healthy, I love food when it's there, I nourish my body when I need to, not when I have some idea about it. And I think everyone can relate to, especially now we're denatured. Our connection to our sources of food is go to the supermarket, get bombarded with sugar as your first thing in, it's not like there's not a natural rhythm given to us in the way our culture and society is for how to relate to food. So to have that experience of like, oh, well, I can create that for myself by understanding deeper what my body's telling me. I can start to shape my routines with with food. And then that transitions into, well, how do I shape my routines or the way I relate at work or in my relationships or in my community? It's really, really profound and beautiful. So if someone was to want to learn more about you, learn more about your work, possibly work with you, how would they go about that? What would be the best way?
Yeah, well, if anyone's interested, the easiest way is to just follow me on social media. I post regularly on Instagram and Facebook and LinkedIn, and I have a podcast called Hungry, Trust Your Body, Free Your Mind, which is also named for my first book that I published in 2019 called Hungry, Trust Your Body, Free Your Mind Around Food. And so that content is a great way to just kind of get to know me and get a sense of, what I have to share. And hopefully there's lots of information that can be helpful for folks. And then of course my website, which is Tara, I have a dash, tara-whitney.com. And that, I just want folks to know, like, hear my point of view on this. And so I appreciate you sharing that. And then, when people feel like they're ready to change their relationship with food and their body, then the easiest thing to do is to book a clarity call with me. And I have my scheduling link right on my website. So it's really easy to just book in a time and take some time and talk and see if we're a good fit and if it makes sense to connect and work together.
Beautiful. Well, I'm so pleased to have been able to speak with you, Tara, because, in my own work, this is also, I have clients that are dealing with these issues. So it's really supportive for me to learn from you so that I can better help them as well. And just to, I could talk to you all day. I find this, the more I talk to you, the more I see, I guess, I don't know, this understanding of the fundamental like inroad that food is, because it is so fundamental. And yet the freedom, that's what I really hear in your message, is like, it's so fundamental to who we are and how we are as physiological beings as well. And yet when you can really come to a place of peace and freedom with it, that's where you want to be, in this neutral relationship.
Yeah, it opens up so much. Yep, totally liberating. Yeah, which I know you and I are doing very similar work, working through the body to create liberation.
Maybe we need to do a joint thing with that as the catchphrase. I'm writing it down.
Perfect. Yeah, exactly. Tara, thank you. Thank you for these questions. This has been really powerful for me. I'm glad that we have connected and collaborated around this.
Oh, no, likewise. Thank you so much for your beautiful, gentle, kind, compassionate wisdom. It's been really enlightening for me, and I'm really excited that you are, out there doing this work. So thank you. And thank you for taking the time today.
Thanks.